about him, or?
Well, like a 5-year-old kid, a 4-year-old kid. In fact, I still think sometimes that we had to greet. Every greeting was Heil Hitler, and it still seems to feel like good day, hello, you know. And you had to sign, for instance, kids would sign Mother's Day cards was Heil Hitler, and letters was Heil Hitler, and so it was what it was. And I have for my own family, my mother was very much pro-Hitler, because what happened was Germany was really pretty much morally destroyed after the First World War, and but Hitler brought back work to people. There used to be like 25% unemployed, and they brought work back. He had the Autobahn. There was a pension for old people. There was young people were in clubs. They were having a good time, and so this really nationalistic thing started. And mothers who had children were adored by Hitler, so he felt really good about it. However, my father was very different. He never joined a party, and my mother was really upset about that, because where will we be when we reign over the world, you know, because you never joined the party. And he said that some of the people he saw in the party in leading positions he might have known before, and he felt if hoods like that were in leading positions in the party, nothing good could become of it. And if I would ask him later on, I said, Papa, you were one of the few people who had nothing to do with the Third Reich, because he was not on the front either. But he ended up saying, that's not true. We all had something to do with it, because everything was geared towards this. And he was working for Zeiss Icon here, probably the name of it, and he was leading departments which made bomb sites. So he was also involved in it.
What city did you live in? Just
Well, that's probably the most interesting about my report. The city I lived in as a little child during the war was Dresden. Dresden in English, I guess. And that was totally destroyed. Dresden was totally destroyed. 125,000 people died in one night. And there was no, it was the Allies, and there was nothing really there to bomb. There were no factories. It was just art. It was a very cultural city, and you can always go online and see what Dresden looked like and how it was later on, and then how it is now. And we left with the last train out of Dresden, and which was very lucky. And it was just, nobody left Dresden. In fact, a lot of refugees were there. But my mother had this feeling all day, I have to get out of here. And so she packed everything up. And like I said, my brother and myself and my mother left the last train out. It was packed with people. We were pushed through the windows to get into the train. And it was just rough. You had to go somewhere for safety.
After Dresden?
After Dresden, we went to some relatives in a small village in the west, thank God, because later on the east wasn't doing so well when the Russians had inherited it. But then again, we were very fortunate because we were in a village. My father's relatives were farmers, and that was the only place where you could get food. And even there was kind of hard. For instance, my mother would let me roam around the village, and I would go to people and say, "Do you have anything to eat?" And she never said, don't beg, because otherwise we would have starved. Well, when I grew up, they didn't talk about it because it was too soon after it happened, and people knew about it finally in the end. They knew about it and they didn't want to talk about it. Plus, what surprised me all the time is when I went back to Germany, I was trying to find out more about it later on. And people didn't want to talk about it also simply for the reason because they suffered so much themselves that's what always came up. You know, my father died in World War. My cousin, you know, we lost a brother and so on. So the Holocaust is probably the most horrible thing about the World War, but it was not something we discussed. No, not at all, because just think, when I grew up and knew anything about the war, it would be what a 5-year-old kid would know, and Pearl Harbor would not be in my vocabulary.
Mm-hmm.
Well, for me, it has a big effect, especially the Holocaust, because I did not want to face it ever. I was married to a husband who had majored in history, and he wanted to discuss it with me. I couldn't. I wasn't. Any time if I saw an article about it, I would just go straight over it. I didn't want to know about it. And then I decided to go to college here in the States, and I had to really face it. I finally had to face the Holocaust. And for 2 weeks, I could barely stop crying just thinking of what had happened. And my husband accused